But the overarching issue in all of these, whether we're talking about police shootings or
Yes.
people getting equal access to opportunity in whatever field, is the issue of race. And there's some people now who believe that race is such an intractable problem in America that perhaps we may not ever be able to solve it. Soledad, what do you think?
No, because I don't think I could get out of bed if I thought that race was such an intractable problem. I think we've actually made some very notable and very large steps forward over the last 400 years or so. But I would add to Karen's long list of sort of where to apply pressure, the media, because I think media does still shape public opinion, and I am often sort of pushing people to do better in how they think about issues. So, for example, I don't think you're going to have a lot of progress if you can't get the word racist out on a piece of paper. I mean, and people will do all kinds of gymnastics, reporters will do all kinds of gymnastics to, racially charged, racially tinged. They really, really struggle. I mean, it's almost comical if it weren't so serious, to avoid calling people who do racist things over a long period of time racist or bigoted. I think that's problematic. And again, I think social media is a very good way to apply pressure to make sure that newsrooms are held accountable for their headlines and for how they frame stories and for how they think about both sidesing, coverage. I think that's really, really important. Race can't be an intractable issue because I think we have a long runway to try to figure it out. And I think there are certain times in our history where we're more willing than other times to figure it out. But I think this is an inflection point. And I think, as Karen points to those poll numbers, the idea that now white people who consistently have it's almost been the flip, right? And, black people, is there racism? White people say no in large numbers. Black people say yes in the opposite large number. Now that's actually changed, right? And that means that there's a moment and people's thinking has changed. And I also think the philosophy, if you just talk about policing around a few bad apples, clearly, I mean, there's so many videos that have now come out that people even people who are very grateful for the police in their neighborhood and maybe personally haven't had any issues themselves, are seeing too many of these stories that the few bad apples argument just doesn't seem to work anymore. So I think, again, the issue for me is never just to say it's policing or it's housing or it's, work and justice. It's all of the above. And that means some of those solutions, I think, have to be race-based strategies. In America, we're very reluctant to have conversations about race. We're really, really, it's like the third rail of conversations. I think white people are uncomfortable. I think black people are uncomfortable. So you very rarely have conversations about it. But I don't know if you can get out of a problem around race without having solutions that very overtly talk about race. They can't be race neutral. They can't just be poverty problems. They actually have to be poverty solutions. They have to be solutions that tackle head on the issues of race. And I think we're more willing now to have those conversations bluntly, but are we fully there? Probably not. But I will point out just one quick thing that I think is a real shift. And I think it was Steve who mentioned it. He talked about systems. The idea that we're even talking about systems. I mean, in the newsroom, that is such a shift, right? It was always this police officer or this town or this individual. And we're now talking about the system of racial profiling or systemic racism. And many people really don't know what that actually means. And so the idea that we're even having this conversation as a reporter who's worked on these stories for a long time, to be able to say, let's dive into systemic racism is kind of crazy and a very good sign, I would say.
Steve, from your vantage point, I'd like to hear, as a white American, your view on, sort of the intractability of dealing with the race problem.
Two things. One is black people of color have been talking about racism and injustice forever. And racism just sort of shape shifts. And one of the things I think is most important in white people having conversations with white people is for white people to stop telling black people to solve problems that white people have created. I mean,
Thank you.
racism. I mean, these are concepts that were created by white Europeans. And you look at you look at the war on drugs as a simple example. You know, for Black and brown people, it results in human caging. It's a law enforcement issue. It's a crime. When white people become addicted in great numbers to opioids, oh, that's a health issue. That requires treatment and intervention. You look at the different outcomes in schooling, but let me stop right there, because it's so obvious in the war on drugs and the racism that has resulted in disproportionate minority confinement and mass incarceration.